you might get like a real guy, a real socialist guy who honeymooned in the Soviet Union as the standard bearer for one of the major parties. And I happen to think that he's competitive. He's a lot more competitive than a lot of Republicans perhaps appreciate because he does have the same sort of populist rage against the machine thing going on that Donald Trump does. And that's a scary idea that a guy like that could win.
He came back from the Soviet Union, not like in, 1923, not in 1934, when maybe you could be confused about how things were going. He came back in 88, 87?
Yes,
88. Came back and he's like, look, they have these youth culture, they have organization. We have a lot to learn from those people. It's like, no, we have nothing to learn. The only thing we have to learn is don't do it that way.
Yeah.
That's the bad way. Never do it. I mean, these sister city, Burlington, Vermont with...
Well, there's no excuse because at that point, everybody knew how many millions of people that Joseph Stalin killed.
Yes.
And we sort of all agreed, hopefully, that was not a good thing.
And that, all the countries of Central Europe were captive police states with one or two exceptions. Communism's bad. He will say now, and there's been, I've done some writing, other people have done some writing too. You go back and see his writing and his thoughts in the 1970s, and he did want to nationalize banks. He wanted to nationalize the means of production. That was the goal of his revolution there. When he's asked about it now, he's like, look, when I was the mayor of Burlington, I didn't, nationalize the corner stores. Well, good. So let's talk about why you didn't. Let's talk about what you learned so that you were not in that space there and have any sense of regret, perhaps, or explanation of how your views have evolved. That's not what happened. I remember Andrew, what's-his-face, who's the Polish last name, I can't pronounce it, CNN, who excavates people's files from the back. So he did some excavation of Bernie's crazy newspaper writing and public access TV shows from the 70s. And so when they got a quote from the Bernie Sanders campaign, they're like, his record has been consistent for 50 years. He's always been on the side of the working people against the oligarchs. Consistent for 50 years is not something to brag about that, because you were wrong on a very big issue. You looked the other way in Cuba, in Nicaragua, in the Soviet Union. That was a pretty colossal misjudgment, and I'm curious to know, how he and why he learned. He's not going to say that, but the thing is, that's me. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Democratic voter. I'm not his base in any way. He doesn't need my vote, and the base doesn't really seem to care. For the most part, they see this as even if they're not even engaging with it intellectually, they see this as oppo research by the Jonathan Chaits of the world, who they hate because they think they're neoliberal sellout swines trying to keep the insurgency down. So yeah, we could be in a place, and that's what happens when you pendulum from right populism to left populism. Yeah. You're going to get unspeakable policies and stuff that people campaigned on suddenly in the White House.